Your boy Pella. Since we dealing with Britain, let's go and we headed for Black History Month in Britain. Let's go ahead and get a quote from Ancient and Modern Britons, Volume 1 by David McRitchie. Says this was copywritten in 1996, I think. So this is by a white guy or a European, basically modern European. And we're going to start right here where it says, as I have mentioned, he also includes the descendants of the ancient Egyptians has I fault. Let's start again. As I have mentioned, he also includes the descendants of the ancient Egyptian under this heading. For although the Egyptian has been much modified by civilization and probably by admixture, he still retains the dark skin, the black, silky, wavy hair, the long skull, the fleshy lips, and the broadish alley of the nose, which we know distinguish his remote ancestors and which caused both him and them to approach the Australian and Dasu more clearly than they do any form of mankind. The same intimate authority states in another place, I shall be inclined to look upon the Papa races of the New Guinea, the New Holland, for the nearest allies of man to whom the shell mounds of Europe once belonged. Of these people he speaks in the following terms. In the Andaman Islands, the peninsula of Malacca, in the Philippines, in the islands which stretch from wireless lines eastward and southward, nearly panel with the east coast of Australia to New Caledonia, and finally in Tasmania, man with dark skin and woolly hair occur to constitute a special modification of the Negro type, the Negritos. Only the Adamants have presented skulls approaching or exceeding the index of 80. All the Negritos, crania of which has been examined are dolichocephalic, but the skulls of the eastern and southern Negritos present, as I have mentioned, a remarkable approximation to the Australoid type, and differ notably from the ordinary African Negroes in the great brow ridges and the pentagonal normal occiput. The best known and most typical of these eastern Negritos are the inhabitants of Tasmania and of New Caledonia, and those of the islands of the Torres Strait and of New Guinea. In the outlying islands of the eastward, especially in Fiji, the Negritos certainly undergone considerable intermixture with the Polynesians, and seems probable that a similar crossing of the Malays have occurred in New Guinea. Okay, it's a lot to get here, but let's go ahead and just decipher what we know. So let's explain it. So one thing we know is when he says, "For although the ancient Egypt has been much modified by civilization and probably by admixture," so he says probably by admixture, he still retains his dark skin, the black skin. The dark skin, the black, silky, wavy hair. Okay, so he just said that the Egyptians are the dark skinned people. So I'm dark skinned, okay? Broadish, fleshy lips, broadish eye of the nose, which we know distinguishes remote ancestors. My fault. Then he says, we know him to approach the Australian and Dasu more clearly than any form of mankind. Then he said this same author, this is what this author Richie is saying, the same author who he quoted this from, which he says quoted on page 121 of volume 2, noted Ethical Society's Journal. Okay, so that's where you can find it. We'll find that later on. And he says this guy also says in the Papuan races of New Guinea and New Holland for the nearest allies of man to whom the shell mines of Europe once belonged. So he's saying the people of Papua New Guinea and New Holland once had the shell mines of Europe. Of these people, he speaks in the following terms. In the Andaman Islands and the peninsula of Malacca, which I got to figure out, it's in the Philippines, and the islands of Wallace Line eastward and southward, nearly parallel to east coast of Australia to